binge-watching a horror TV series in one sitting. What's that like? This show completely overturns the dialectical relationship between humanity and faith, delving deeply into human nature and divinity, life and death, salvation and damnation. Without further ado, let's dive into the details slowly and savor the experience. On an isolated island, separated from the mainland by the sea, there was an ancient town with a long history. Once flourishing with abundant marine resources, the town has now gradually fallen into decline as its population has dwindled, leaving only around 100 people behind. To keep the town running, 2 boats travel daily between the island and the mainland. One day, Riley, a young man who's been away from home for many years, returns to the town. Annie, his mother, joyfully runs to welcome her son. Riley had accidentally hit and killed a girl while driving, resulting in a 4-year prison sentence. Perhaps due to his guilt over the girl's death, Riley has been unable to let go during his time in prison, often seeing the girl's ghostly apparition appearing before him. Unable to find peace elsewhere, Riley reluctantly returns to his hometown, hoping to unlock the chains of his heart. Along with him, a young man arrived in the town carrying a strange large box. He headed straight to the home of the town's nun. At this moment, a knocking sound comes from the box. The man hesitates for a moment, then opens it. From this day on, the town seems to break its long-standing tranquility. As night falls, a group of young men gather outdoors to drink and chat. The mood grows darker, and they start discussing the strange legends of the town. Suddenly, a horrific cat's cry echoes in the distance, and they assume it's just a wild cat fighting. One of the boys glances over. Whether by mistake or not, those glowing eyes in the night have vanished. After the boys left, a cat quietly approached its companion, which seemed to have already died. And at that moment, meanwhile, back at home, Riley is having a rare family gathering with his parents. No matter how Riley's life has been, Annie is clearly happy to have her son back by her side. Riley also expressed his thoughts, hoping that his parents would take him to church the next day, seeking forgiveness from God to ease his inner turmoil. Although his parents know Riley has never been religious, they agree to his request, hoping it might help him find peace. The next day, Riley, accompanied by his parents, goes to the church where he meets his childhood friend, Aaron. Aaron seems to sense something and glances back at him. At that moment, a young priest steps up to the pulpit. He introduces himself as Paul, explaining that the previous priest, Father Pruitt, is unable to lead the congregation due to health issues and will be staying on the mainland for treatment. Paul will now take over and conduct the services for the town's residents. After the Mass, Father Paul quickly becomes well-liked by the townspeople. Riley also catches up with Erin, who has changed. She used to be rebellious and full of life, but now her eyes show nothing but emptiness. Through their conversation, Riley learns that Erin has only recently returned to the town. Erin had been living in a big city where she had started a family, but things hadn't been happy. Her husband was an alcoholic who frequently abused her, and Erin, unable to tolerate it any longer, returned to her hometown. Shortly after her return, she discovered she was pregnant. She self-deprecatingly remarks that when she and Riley left the town, they both vowed never to come back. Now, however, fate has brought them back to the place they swore they'd never return to, as if it were the will of destiny. Riley also shared his experience with Aaron. Seeing the man filled with guilt, Aaron encouraged him, hoping he would soon break free from the chains in his heart. As night fell, a storm arrived at the town. Riley looked out the window and suddenly saw someone walking through the heavy rain outside. He called for his family to come and look, but they saw no one. Riley insisted that the figure looked exactly like the old priest, Father Pruitt. His family dismissed it, as the new priest, Paul, had mentioned during the day that Pruitt was receiving treatment far away on the mainland. To prove he wasn't seeing things, Riley rushed outside. He called out loudly to the figure, who seemed to notice him and quickly ran away. Amidst the thunder of lightning, Riley eventually lost sight of the figure. Had he been mistaken? Maybe it was just a passerby. Riley quickly returned home. The next morning, the storm had ravaged the town. Flocks of seagulls floated in the sky as if celebrating their survival. However, when Riley's family went to the beach, they found numerous dead cats scattered across the shore. This eerie sight quickly alarmed the entire town. Upon inspection, it was discovered that the cats' necks had been bitten by some kind of animal. Some speculated that it might have been a shark or an osprey attacking them. To prevent the spread of disease, they decided to burn all the bodies. Meanwhile, Father Paul visited the town's doctor, Sarah, at her house. He explained that he had heard Sarah's mother, Mildred, couldn't attend Mass due to her health and had come to perform the Mass for her. Entering the room, Mildred, lying weak in bed, mistook Paul for the old priest, Father Pruitt. Sarah quickly clarified that he was the new priest of the town. After Sarah left, Paul looked at Mildred with sympathy, almost like an old friend, then gave her what he claimed was holy water. He told Mildred that this was a gift from God. Since his return, Riley had lost all sense of direction. There were no stressful jobs on the island, and everyone seemed to live carefree lives. Maybe this was a good place to retire, peaceful and untouched by the world. But it didn't seem like a place for young people with ambition. While walking along the road, Riley ran into Aaron. They exchanged greetings and chatted about their childhood memories. That night, as Riley slept, he dreamed of sitting alone in a small boat. The girl he had killed appeared in his mind, haunting him like a nightmare that never left. Meanwhile, outside the town, a strange figure appeared to be hovering in the sky. A man happened to pass by and heard strange noises coming from a house. He went inside to check. Thinking the townspeople were playing a prank on him, he entered the wooden cabin, only to find a pair of eyes staring at him. Since Father Paul arrived in town, it seemed as if he had a magical influence, drawing people to attend Mass. At that moment, he stood in front of Lisa, a young girl who had been paralyzed for many years, and picked up something that symbolized divine grace. Just as the crowd thought he was going to give the object to Lisa, Paul suddenly took a few steps back and told Lisa to come and get it herself. Everyone assumed the priest was joking, so Lisa tried to move her wheelchair to get it, but Paul insisted that she stand up and take it herself. Seeing Paul's serious expression, the crowd thought he was mocking the paralyzed girl and began to stand up, scolding him for his behavior. Lisa's mother declared that the joke wasn't funny at all, but the girl seemed to sense something.
What?
Paul's actions completely won over the crowd. Everyone watched in disbelief, wondering, could he truly be an emissary of God? Lisa's parents quickly took her to Sarah. After Sarah's examination, she discovered that Lisa's condition was actually just a normal spinal injury, and with gradual recovery, she would soon be able to walk like a normal person. However, Sarah was puzzled. Lisa had been partially paralyzed, so why was she suddenly improving? Lisa's parents claimed it was a gift from God. After they left, Sarah went into the room, only to find that her mother was no longer in bed. Hearing noises from upstairs, she hurried up and found her mother in an upstairs room. Sarah couldn't understand how her mother had gotten upstairs, considering she had been bedridden for years. Ever since Father Paul had visited the day before, it seemed as if her mother truly had received a divine blessing. From then on, townspeople started coming to seek God's blessing. The nun warned everyone not to overreact and to trust that Father Paul would bring hope to the town. Meanwhile, Riley approached Paul. He seemed to have no faith, but Paul seemed to understand his situation. Paul assumed Riley had come seeking help, but Riley directly asked Paul if he had known that Lisa would be able to stand up. He thought maybe Lisa was already close to recovery, and the timing just coincidentally made people believe that Paul had healed her. Paul hadn't expected Riley to question him. He explained that he didn't care about reputation. He just wanted to help the people of the town, and he didn't know how to answer Riley's question. Because of his own struggles, Riley secretly hoped it was God's blessing, thinking that maybe he could also find redemption. But his long-standing materialistic views made him believe it could all just be coincidence. Either way, the townspeople had already come to believe that this new priest was the one carrying out God's will. More and more people were attending Mass, and Riley began to try joining them. In his spare time, Paul continued to visit Sarah's house to perform Mass for Mildred, and Mildred had even begun to walk up and down the stairs on her own. After that, Lisa, who had regained the use of her legs, started dating Riley's brother, Warren. Riley also built a crib for Aaron's soon-to-be-born child. Riley's parents danced joyfully. Everything seemed to be heading in a positive direction. However, one day during Mass, Paul suddenly collapsed. Everyone stood up, worried about the priest's health, assuming he was exhausted from all the work. But when Paul woke up, everyone had already left. Paul quietly went into the confessional and began to confess to God. He admitted that he had lied, but that all of it had been for the good of the town. It turned out that he was actually Father Pruitt, the former priest. Years ago, he had gone on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem with a church group. Due to his old age and symptoms of dementia, he often got lost along the way. The others didn't realize his condition and just thought he wasn't familiar with the path. He was afraid to tell anyone, fearing that he would lose his role as a priest. But he could feel that his time was running out, and he had planned to stay on the mainland after the pilgrimage to rest until he passed away. But one day, while on the road to Damascus, he got separated from the group again. In his confused state, he didn't realize he was lost. A storm swept through, leaving him stranded in the desert. It was there that he saw a mysterious ancient ruin. To escape the wind, he stumbled into a dark cave. There was no light, and every step felt like stepping into nothingness. As he struck a match to look around, he suddenly saw a pair of bright eyes, and he was terrified. When he lit another match to investigate, a strange face appeared before him, like a demon, and it bit into Pruitt's neck. Fear and pain spread throughout his body. Perhaps Pruitt had already lost his mind, but he saw the creature's massive wings and took it for an angel. He begged the so-called angel for a blessing, and upon hearing his prayer, the creature slit its own wrist and allowed Pruitt to drink its blood. As Pruitt stepped out of the cave, he realized he had regained the strength of youth. Although the creature was nothing like the angel he had imagined, it had given him a second life. From then on, Pruitt chose to believe it was an angel. Although the angel feared the sunlight, Pruitt knew that his struggling hometown needed the angel more than anything. So he placed the angel in a box and brought it back with him. He also changed his name to Paul. In his confession, Paul asked for God's forgiveness. The lie he had told was for the sake of the town, hoping that the elderly and sick could have a new life, just like he did. Since Paul's return, he had been mixing the vampire angel's blood into what he called holy vessels. This was witnessed by Warren, but he didn't know what it really was. After all, Father Paul's arrival had brought hope to everyone, and these substances were later used as communion for the faithful. At this point, Aaron went to Dr. Sarah to check on her pregnancy. As Sarah checked over and over again, Aaron asked about the condition of the baby, but Sarah seemed to notice something wrong. She told Aaron that the baby had disappeared. Hearing this, Aaron didn't understand what it meant. Sarah, equally baffled, explained that she didn't know why the baby had suddenly disappeared. She said she would send a blood sample for testing on the mainland and would have them contact Aaron. Perhaps the facilities there can determine the exact cause, but it seems Aaron may have had a miscarriage. Aaron refused to believe it. How could her baby just disappear? She asked where her baby had gone, but Sarah didn't know how to comfort her. After regaining the use of her legs, Lisa came to Joe's house in the town. It turned out that Lisa's paralysis was caused by Joe's actions, though it was entirely accidental. Ever since Lisa was unable to walk, Joe had been living with the guilt and self-blame. Now, Lisa, being kind-hearted, spoke of the consequences of Joe's actions, but ultimately told him she forgave him and hoped he would stop living in guilt. Hearing this, Joe burst into tears. The one thing he had always felt guilty about was this girl standing before him. He never expected her to regain hope and stand again. When Riley came to find Paul again, Joe was already sitting there. Neither of these men had ever believed in God, but after witnessing Lisa's miracle, they had slowly begun to change their perspective. It seemed that before long, the whole town might become followers of Paul. Paul told them to relax and try not to drink too much anymore. After they left, Paul's body began to show signs of discomfort, as if something inside him was about to burst out. At the home of Sister Bev, Lisa's parents were sitting there. At that moment, Paul pushed open the door and collapsed to the floor. His body began to convulse, and a strange red liquid poured from his mouth. Everyone stared in horror at this scene, until Paul lay still. Lisa's father checked on Paul's condition and stated that the priest didn't look good. At that moment, Paul's eyes turned blood red. Just when everyone thought the priest had ascended to heaven, Paul suddenly woke up, which only strengthened their belief that this was a divine blessing. After everyone left, Bev brought food to Paul's room. This woman's faith in God was extreme, and because of that, she held a deep reverence for Paul. As Bev went to open the curtains, Paul stopped her. Perhaps she sensed something was wrong with Paul's behavior. As she was about to leave the room, she told Paul that the people outside would keep the secret and would serve as his loyal apostles. But Paul should tell them who he really was. Bev had already guessed that Paul might be the old priest, Father Pruitt. She wanted Paul to prove it to everyone, so that, under the influence of such miracles, even more people would become their followers. After Bev left, Paul tried to place his hand in the sunlight, but it resulted in severe burns. It seemed the vampire's blood had begun to gradually assimilate him. In the past, Paul could walk in the daylight, but now, with his body's transformation, he could no longer touch the sunlight. His body was becoming uncontrollable. He grasped a crucifix, hoping for God's forgiveness, but his palm was burned by the cross. Watching the blood flow from his hands, Paul couldn't control himself and slowly began to lick it. As night fell, Paul stepped outside. He tried to touch the air outside. It seemed that the night no longer harmed his body, and perhaps, from now on, he could only walk in darkness. He made his way to Dr. Sarah's house again, seeking her out for her mother. At this point, Mildred had become young again. This was the result of Paul making Mildred drink the vampire's blood regularly. While it improved her health, it also meant that, in the near future, Mildred might also transform into a bloodthirsty monster. Mildred also recognized Paul, and they tightly held each other's hands. It turns out that they had been secretly together for a long time, and Sarah was the child of Pruitt and Mildred. Fearing that this would be discovered, they had kept it hidden. When Paul returned, he hoped to bring his lover back to the way things were. At that moment, Aaron found Riley, and they shared their pains with each other. Two childhood friends, despite fate pulling them back to the small town, began to draw closer in their hearts. Back at home, Paul's body once again began to fail. The blood in the bottle was nearly gone, and the so-called angel seemed to have disappeared. The overwhelming hunger tortured Paul. Paul went outside, shouting for the angel, but there was no response. With no other choice, he returned to his room and drank the last of the blood. Just then, Joe came to the door. Unable to control his cravings for alcohol, he sought help from Father Paul. Seeing Paul's strange condition, Joe initially intended to leave, but Paul invited him in to sit. As Joe entered, he saw a newspaper with a photo of the young Father Pruitt, who looked exactly like Paul. He thought Paul must be Pruitt's illegitimate son and awkwardly attempted to leave. However, Paul stopped him, first comforting him in the name of God, then stepped forward and embraced Joe. It is then that Paul, holding Joe, feels the irresistible pull of blood. Although Joe fought back violently, Paul didn't let go. When Joe suddenly broke free, the back of his head accidentally hit the corner of the table. As he fell to the ground, blood instantly spread across the floor. Paul slowly walked toward him, and in that instant, his bloodlust exploded. The next morning, the congregation waits in the church for Paul, but he doesn't show up. Reluctantly, Bev went to look for him. When she enters the room, she sees the body on the floor and Father Paul curled up in the corner. Instead of being afraid, Bev went to Father Paul's side and said she would help him change clothes and then head to the church for the service. When Paul placed his hand in the sunlight, Bev saw his palm being burned. She then told him to stay there and that she would handle the situation herself. Clearly, her blind and fanatical faith had clouded her judgment. Bev went to the church, first instructing everyone to pray on their own, then finding two trusted men to come to the room. These men were Lisa's father, Wade, and Sturge, the captain who traveled back and forth to the mainland. Bev successfully brainwashed them, telling them that Father Paul had been targeted by the devil's jealousy, which led to the incident. She instructed them to take the body outside and handle it properly. After some deep thought, the two men began to act. Meanwhile, Aaron had reached the mainland and found a doctor. The blood samples that Sarah had sent over were now fully analyzed. The female doctor told Aaron that, according to the test results, they believed Aaron had never been pregnant. This revelation stunned Aaron. She had clearly undergone tests in the town and even heard the baby's heartbeat. How could this be the result? She explained that she had done ultrasound scans and even had Dr. Sarah confirm it. However, the female doctor insisted they were not mistaken. Aaron showed no signs of pregnancy or miscarriage. She is a healthy young woman. This revelation leaves Aaron utterly confused. Meanwhile, Paul paced back and forth in the church, crying out for the angel to come. The communion was gone, and he didn't know if even worse things would happen next. He needed the angel's blood. At that moment, the eerie figure suddenly appeared before him. Paul sighed with relief and said he was out of communion. The so-called angel told Paul to remain silent and walked straight towards him. Paul knelt devoutly on the ground, ready to receive the arrival of the Holy Communion. At this moment, Riley arrived, looked at the open door, and stepped inside. He saw the eerie scene unfolding before him. Paul slowly walked over, watching the angel bite into Riley's neck before closing the church door. Sarah stares in disbelief at her mother, who now looks younger than her. Mildred said she was going to attend the morning mass with Sarah. The townspeople gathered outside the church. Sturge and Wade told everyone that, due to Father Paul's health, the mass would be moved to the evening from now on. Just then, Dolly saw an unbelievable sight. It was Sarah and her mother walking toward her. Seeing Mildred in her youthful state, Dolly seemed extremely excited. Perhaps Wade had already told Dolly about Paul's condition. When a miracle appeared before their eyes, there was nothing more convincing than this. Meanwhile, Aaron, unable to reach Riley, first went to his house, but his mother didn't know where he had gone. He hadn't returned all night, so Aaron went to the docks to ask Riley's brother if he had seen him, but there was no news of him there either. Warren told their father about the situation, and he was furious. Since the accident, their eldest son had been in a constant state of confusion. Seeing she couldn't find Riley anywhere, Aaron went straight to the sheriff's office and told Sheriff Hassan that Riley was missing. She also mentioned that Riley had once considered suicide due to his struggles. Hassan said that strange things had been happening in town recently, and there had been more than one missing persons case. Just this morning, a woman had come to report her husband had been missing for several days. Yes, it's the man who entered the wooden cabin that night and was attacked by the vampire. As night fell, just before the mass began, Sarah and her mother arrived. Mildred wanted to see her lover. Once everyone had gathered, Paul walked up to the pulpit. But his speech today is different. He tells the congregation to prepare for self-sacrifice, saying that if they follow his guidance, they may die and then be reborn. After his impassioned speech, Paul left. These words seemed to surprise Mildred. Perhaps Paul was no longer the Pruitt she once knew. After the mass ended, Mildred went outside and warned her daughter not to come back here again. Father Paul's speech had now abandoned the truth. Meanwhile, Aaron, asleep at home, hears a knock at the door. When she opened the door, she found it was Riley. She angrily demanded to know where he had been all day and why she couldn't reach him. But Riley asked her if she remembered the promise they made when they left the town. They had once said they would take a small boat to the sea to watch the sunrise. Riley now hoped Aaron would come with him to wait for the sunrise. When they got on the small boat and reached the middle of the sea, Riley said he wanted to tell her a story. Perhaps Aaron wouldn't believe it, but he hoped she would listen. It turned out that just yesterday, Riley had his neck bitten off by a vampire. Afterward, Paul helped Riley adjust his head and fed him vampire blood. Riley was then turned into a vampire. At that moment, Riley was terrified. Although Paul wanted to sit down and talk, Riley bolted outside. Riley saw the burn on his arm, and Paul said that Riley needed to sit down and talk, that he would explain everything. As Riley sat down, Paul told him his story and said he had died and been reborn. Everything was a gift from the angel. Riley stared at Paul in disbelief. He never imagined that the man before him was the old Father Pruitt. Riley angrily demands to know what has happened to him and what the winged creature is. Paul explained that it was the angel. Just then, Bev walked in, and Paul said he wanted to perform an experiment on Riley. Paul instructed Riley to sit on the stool, then held him down and asked Bev to slowly move closer. The overwhelming desire for blood seemed to make Riley realize that he had already turned into a monster. But Paul told him that this was the power the angel had given him. It made him young and strong, nourished his body, and made him pure. Paul then asked Riley how he felt, but Riley said he only felt anger. This obviously angered Paul.
I promise you complete honesty, and I am giving that to you, and I'm tired of you lying to me, Riley Flynn. I've forgiven it time and again, but today is critical for us, and I am finished. Complete honesty. How does it make you feel?
Jealous.
After Riley said this, although he gained Paul's approval, he himself felt that he had violated the basic principles and morality of being human. Even though he had gained immortality, it was built on the suffering of others, and this was no different from the inner conflict he had carried for many years. Soon after, Bev brought a bowl of fresh blood to Riley. They wanted to see Riley join their side. Riley couldn't control himself. He drank the blood in one go. How could an ordinary person resist such a thirst for blood? As night fell, Riley stepped outside and saw the world in a whole new way. The lights seemed to have been ignited, glowing with a radiant halo. He walks to the seaside, his enhanced vision revealing a shimmering glow over the ocean. Even the stars in the sky appear differently. After finishing his story, Riley told Aaron he wanted her to row a boat to the mainland and never come back. But he knew Aaron wouldn't do that. He also knew Aaron didn't believe him, so he had no choice but to make her see for herself. Though it was selfish, Riley hoped Aaron could escape. Finally, Riley said the words he had been holding in.
I love you, Aaron Green. I love you my whole life. One way or another.
I love you too.
Riley used his own life to show Aaron the existence of vampires. He wanted Aaron to leave this town, but Aaron refuses to abandon the town she grew up in. She decided to go back to the town and seek help. Meanwhile, Riley's parents woke up and received Riley's letter. Riley's father, Ed, upon reading the letter, went straight to find Father Paul. At this moment, the group was secretly discussing the upcoming Easter plans. Ed asked to speak to Paul privately. Once everyone had left, Ed brought out Riley's letter and asked Paul if something had happened to his son. From the contents of the letter, Ed believed something was wrong with his son. It seemed like he was going down a dark path. The letter also contained many strange things, and Ed wondered if Riley had hallucinated because of the past events. Paul understood that Riley might never return. He comforted Ed, saying that Riley might have gone to the mainland. He had often communicated with Riley before and had tried to unlock the chains that bound Riley's heart. Paul then told Ed not to overthink it and to trust in God. On the other side, Aaron found Sarah. She told Sarah everything she had seen and wondered if she was hallucinating. But Sarah said she was willing to believe Aaron's words and admitted she had discovered some crazy things too. Sarah took Aaron to her laboratory. She said if she revealed what she had found, people would think she was crazy. Sarah had been conducting tests. When Aaron mentioned that Riley had spontaneously combusted in the sunlight, Sarah became even more convinced of her discovery. Her mother had become younger and younger. This was unprecedented. Sarah then drew a sample of her mother's blood and tested it, but when it was exposed to sunlight, it immediately began to burn. Sarah then showed Aaron this firsthand. The burning blood triggered the smoke detector in the room, and Mildred thought something had gone wrong. She quickly came out. Aaron sees the increasingly youthful old woman. They sat down to discuss. Sarah said this phenomenon resembled a blood disease called erythropoietic protoporphyria. People with this condition are extremely sensitive to light and can even be burned by sunlight. They also suffer from severe anemia. But this wasn't that disease. Sarah guessed it might be a similar condition. It seemed that the people in town were infected with some kind of virus or parasite. This thing could repair damaged cells, but it also seemed to go wild, craving the iron in the blood. At first, the substance in the blood might be minimal, but as it increased and caused physical changes, it would become more obvious. Sarah continued, saying she had tested both her mother's blood and Aaron's blood. When exposed to sunlight, the strange substance in their blood quickly burns away, leaving only normal blood behind. Aaron didn't understand. Was there something in her blood too? Sarah explained that she had saved Aaron's blood from a previous pregnancy test, and she believed other people in town were likely experiencing the same thing. Then Sarah went on, saying that her mother's and Aaron's blood still mostly contained normal blood, with a typical red blood cell composition. But Riley's blood might have contained an excessive amount of this substance, which is why he spontaneously combusted in the sunlight. Aaron asked what would happen to a pregnant person if they were infected with this substance. Sarah understood Aaron's question, but told her that this substance would treat anything foreign in the body as an enemy, and the fetus might have been seen as such. Hearing this, Aaron was clearly devastated. Her baby was lost before it could even be born. Mildred quickly asked if there was a solution. Sarah replied that she had tested many times but had no answers yet. After leaving Sarah's house, Aaron found Annie. She told her that Riley was dead and shared everything Riley had said. But Annie thought Aaron was crazy. She yelled at Aaron and kicked her out. Meanwhile, Sarah went to Sheriff Hassan. She told him about her tests and Riley's situation. Because Riley's reputation wasn't great, and without first-hand evidence, Sheriff Hassan didn't believe her. Feeling helpless, Sarah, Aaron, and Mildred went to the dock. But they found that the boats to the mainland were gone. It seemed someone didn't want people leaving the town, especially since tonight was Easter Mass. As night fell, Wade and Sturge shut down the town's signal tower. They didn't want any trouble before Mass. At that moment, Sarah, Aaron, and Mildred were discussing how to leave, but the island was too far from the mainland and they couldn't rely on a regular boat to get there. Everyone would be going to Mass tonight, and Aaron decided to go too. Though she didn't know what would happen, Riley's sacrifice made her decide she had to do something. Soon, Bev led a group of followers, performing a grand ceremony to welcome the occasion. Sarah, Aaron, and Mildred decided to join the crowd and head to the church. With more and more people joining, the entire group slowly moved towards the church. In the darkness, the burning candles looked like little torches. People thought they were lighting the way to the future, unaware that what awaited them might be annihilation. When they arrived at the church, Paul first apologized to the crowd. He explained that Father Pruitt wasn't recovering on the mainland, but had instead received the angel's blessing. He had not only regained his health, but also his youth. Then Paul told the people that he was Father Pruitt and hoped for their forgiveness, saying he had been forced to deceive them. But it seemed this didn't shock the crowd. Aaron is shocked by their lack of reaction. At the same time, Sturge, one of Paul's most loyal followers, stepped forward to receive the communion. Bev immediately rushed to the back, grabbing a cup of vampire blood, and there appeared to be some sort of poison on the table. It seemed Paul intended for everyone to turn into vampires. He mixed the poison into the vampire blood. If everyone drank it, the entire town might truly live forever. Once Sturge drank it, he quickly collapsed, convulsing on the floor. This scene clearly shocked everyone. Paul comforted Sturge as he told the others to witness the miracle unfolding. Sheriff Hassan saw this and couldn't accept it. He prepared to leave with his son Ali. But just then, he saw the vampire standing at the door. Paul explained that this was the angel. It represented God, and it was there to bless them. Then, the vampire slowly walked toward the podium, under the shocked gazes of the people, and spread its massive wings. Paul continued to praise the angel's greatness. Just then, Sturge woke up. Paul kept assuring everyone that the miracle had arrived and hoped more people would join. Lisa's parents, ignoring their daughter's fear, rushed forward to help and picked up the cup. They began distributing it to everyone. The others, still stunned by the terrifying angel, seemed unable to snap out of their shock. Paul loudly declared that this was a divine gift. With just a little courage, they could attain eternal life. Sheriff Hassan could no longer stand it. He turned to leave with his son, but Ali didn't want to go. He broke free from his father's grasp. Paul quickly stepped forward, telling Sheriff Hassan he shouldn't deny Ali the chance for salvation. Sheriff Hassan immediately drew his weapon. He wouldn't allow anyone to hurt his son, but others stopped him. Some people, taking advantage of the moment, tackled him to the ground, and his weapon fell away. Bev quickly rushed in to keep manipulating the crowd and congratulated Ali for choosing the right path. Sheriff Hassan watched helplessly as his son drank the poisoned blood. Soon, others began drinking as well. Aaron and Sarah tried to stop some people, but no one would let them block the hope of eternal life. Chaos erupted throughout the church. Mildred couldn't bear to see her former lover become like this. She picked up the handgun from the ground and shot at Paul, the bullet hitting him in the head. Bev saw Paul fall to the ground and immediately ordered Sturge to close the doors. She walked up to Sheriff Hassan, preparing to punish him in the name of God. But Sturge, seeing Bev's hands stained with blood, felt his bloodlust awaken. Then, the people who had drunk the poisoned blood began to slowly revive. When Dolly came back to life, she felt the world around her change. She hugged her daughter and heard the thumping sound of blood in her veins. Wade immediately lunged at a girl. It was clear that once these people were transformed, they could no longer control their bloodlust. The newly turned vampires began attacking the remaining humans. The church doors had been locked, and Aaron and the others were forced to run toward the back. Warren quickly pulled Lisa away. Ed, trying to protect them, was tackled to the ground by others. In the midst of the chaos, only the group of them made it into a small room at the back, while the church descended into total disorder. Inside the room, Aaron sees Bev. Bev, clearly terrified, still expressed her disdain for Aaron and the others. She continued to boast about the angel's glory. Without warning, Aaron shot and killed Bev. The group hurriedly escaped through the back door. Once they had left, Bev suddenly sat up. Her eyes gleamed with an unnatural light. Clearly, she had already consumed the vampire's blood. Bev entered the church, looking at the chaos in the hall. She told Sturge to open the doors. Sturge replied that they shouldn't open them until Father Paul had woken up. But Paul hadn't died. It seemed vampires weren't so easy to kill. However, Bev, no longer satisfied with being just an ordinary nun, told Sturge that those who went against God had to be dealt with. She turned to Father Paul and said she would continue to spread the priest's glory and the angel's blessings. At that moment, Sarah's mother suddenly sat up. After being killed by the vampire bite, and with years of consuming the Eucharist, she had transformed into a vampire. She entered the church and saw Father Paul sitting quietly, as if pondering whether what he had brought to the people was truly the gospel. Meanwhile, the town residents who had been turned into vampires had already left. They were determined to spread the gospel to every corner. A brutal massacre was quietly underway as these bloodthirsty monsters relentlessly attacked every normal human in town. They were completely unable to control themselves. Ed walked down the road, witnessing all of this. Although he had been turned into a vampire, he refused to join in. Aaron and the other survivors hid in a room, discussing how to escape this place. Warren said he had a canoe, but it couldn't fit everyone. Aaron then realized a terrifying problem. There were some fishermen in town, and if they took their boats to the mainland, the consequences could be unimaginable. So they decided to burn the boats first and destroy the church as well. Just then, a bottle of kerosene was thrown inside. Bev and Sturge have arrived outside. She loudly called for people to come and receive the gospel, hoping they would make the right choice. To buy time for the others to escape, Annie decided to stay behind. After everyone left, she took a knife and stepped outside. First mocking Bev, she mocks Bev, calling her a cowardly, selfish wretch who is nothing but a pitiful creature. With those words, she slit her own throat. Two bloodthirsty monsters tried to say something, but ultimately they couldn't resist the temptation. Meanwhile, Paul told his lover that when he was granted a second life, he felt he had found true hope. Perhaps from now on, death would never come again. He wanted his lover to regain a healthy body, and for the rest of the town to never experience aging, sickness, or death again. So he placed the creature he believed to be an angel into a box and brought it back with him. To this end, he even told many lies, and he didn't dare to acknowledge his own daughter, Sarah. He had never thought of this as evil, but now everything was turning out differently from what he had imagined. He didn't know if the people's choices were right or wrong. Mildred comforted Paul, saying that we have no right to interfere with the lives of our children. Just like our daughter, she grew up while we grew old. This is how it should be. This is the truth of life. Upon hearing this, Paul seemed to realize everything. The miracle he had been desperately chasing was nothing more than the continuation of life. At that moment, Aaron and the others arrived at the dock. They poured oil on all the fishing boats. Then, set them on fire. They couldn't let any of the monsters reach the mainland. Lisa and Warren hid in a room and saw the vampire feeding on someone's blood. Lisa fired several shots, but the creature didn't react. Its thirst for blood seemed to surpass everything. Lisa and Warren quickly doused the vampire in oil. When they set it on fire, a scream echoed from the cabin. The monster, now engulfed in flames, bursts out and flies away. Meanwhile, Bev arrived at the warehouse next to the church. She had prepared a bed for everyone. Beforehand, she had ordered Sturge to set fire to the whole town. She planned to gather everyone here, and then the following night they would head to the mainland to spread the gospel. As the bells rang, the bloodthirsty monsters came rushing in. Bev saw that Father Paul had recovered, and she wanted him to become the leader of everyone. But Paul had figured it out, and he firmly declined, hoping they wouldn't do this. This angered Bev. She felt that Father Paul had suddenly betrayed everyone for the sake of this woman. Bev wanted them to enjoy the beauty before sunrise, or else they would never have another chance. She decided that she would lead everyone. She ordered them to take refuge in the church before sunrise, then head to the mainland when nightfall came. Sturge arrived and said that all the boats had been burned. They might not be able to reach the mainland. But Bev replied that in a few days, a cargo ship would come, and they could still leave. She then gathered everyone together, though some still couldn't accept it. Some people even felt a strong sense of guilt after consuming the vampire's blood. Bev now sought to calm everyone's emotions. When Paul walked into the church hall, he saw his daughter, Sarah, spreading oil everywhere. Facing his daughter, Paul apologized. He said he should have recognized her sooner and urged Sarah to leave. He would handle the situation. But suddenly, a gunshot rang out, and it was Sturge who shot Sarah in the chest. Seeing his daughter fall, Paul lunged at Sturge and grabbed his neck, choking him violently. When Paul and Mildred entered the church, they saw Sarah lying on the floor, her fate unknown. Paul quickly fed his own blood to Sarah, but she spat it out. Maybe she didn't want to become a monster, or maybe she hated her father for creating this situation. Sarah left this world in pain. A grieving Paul and Mildred set the church on fire, then left with Sarah's body in their arms. Meanwhile, Bev discovered Sheriff Hassan was also spreading oil in the nearby warehouse. She shot him in the leg. Furious, Bev tells the crowd that this man wants to kill them all. As Bev prepared to judge Sheriff Hassan, Erin emerged from inside. As she took out her lighter to set the fire, the terrifying vampire flew at her, knocking her to the ground and sinking its fangs into her neck. Allie picked up the lighter from the ground. He hesitated for a moment as he looked at his father. Then he ignited the warehouse. Now, all the houses in the town are set on fire, and the people have no place left to hide. Sheriff Hassan looked at Bev and told her that the sunlight would show her what was good and what was bad. Unable to see any hope, Bev shot him. While the vampire was feeding, Erin used a knife to slash its wings. Seeing that all the buildings were now destroyed, the others began to leave. Maybe when the sun rises again, everyone will have vanished. All they could do was spend this last moment with their families. After the vampire finished feeding, its wings were tattered and torn, but it still staggered away, flying off into the night. Lying on the ground, Erin remembered Riley's words. Riley had once asked her, "What happens when we die?" At the time, Erin had said that perhaps in that moment, the cells in the body would die one by one, but the brain would make the neurons burn wildly. Maybe she would feel despair and fear, but probably not, because in that brief moment, she would be busy recalling a lifetime of memories. Until the end, she would be like a burst of energy, dissipating into the universe and returning to the beginning, perhaps to repeat again and again, but in the end, forgetting everything. Life might just be a fleeting, shallow dream, a beautiful wish, endlessly repeated until eternity. Perhaps Riley had agreed with Erin's answer, and later, he gave his life to prove the very answer she had spoken. At this moment, the sun began to rise slowly over the horizon. In that moment, people may have understood that eternity was not the true meaning of life, but love was. Everyone stood by their loved ones, singing songs of love, waiting for death to come. Even though Bev was unwilling, she could not escape her fate. When the sunlight reached the island, people, as their bodies burned, achieved their own redemption.
To the